I'm Abigail, the youngest of 3 kids. My older sister, Sarah, is 2 years older than me, and my brother, Michael, is the eldest, 4 years my senior. We grew up in a modest house in the suburbs, with our mom, Lisa, and dad, Tom. Mom was a housewife, living off interest from a hefty inheritance. Dad worked as a sales manager at a local poultry farm. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. They always made sure we had everything we needed, including college funds for all 3 of us. As we grew older, Michael got into sports, Sarah joined the debate club, and I found my passion in art. Our interests diverged, but our parents always made an effort to support each of us equally. When it came time for college, I chose to study graphic design at a school a few hours away. It was far enough to feel independent, but close enough to visit on holidays. As I drove away, watching my family shrink in the rearview mirror, I had no idea how much things would change. I thought I was just starting a new chapter in my life, not closing the book on my childhood forever. College life was a whirlwind of new experiences. I made friends, pulled all-nighters for projects, and gradually found my footing in the world of design. Weekly Skype calls with my family became monthly, then occasional. It wasn't intentional, just a natural drift as I got busier and more independent. 4 years flew by in a blur of classes, projects, and part-time jobs. Before I knew it, I was clutching my diploma, ready to face the world as a graduate. As I packed up my dorm room, a mix of excitement and anxiety swirled in my stomach. It was time to go home, to figure out my next steps. The drive home felt longer than usual. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed my brother's flashy new car parked out front. Weird, I thought. Michael had always been practical about cars. I lugged my bags to the front door, expecting the usual warm welcome. Instead, I was greeted by an oddly tense atmosphere. "Oh, Abby, you're here," Mom said, glancing over her shoulder as she hustled past with an armload of laundry. "Your old room's been converted to a home office. You can sleep on the couch for now." I stood there, stunned. Okay, where's everyone else?" "Your father's at work. Michael's upstairs with his fiancée. Try not to disturb them." "Fiancée? When did that happen?" I dumped my bags by the couch and wandered into the kitchen, feeling like a stranger in my own home. That's when I noticed the changes. New appliances, fancy kitchenware, and a fridge plastered with Michael's photos and achievements. My artwork was nowhere to be seen. Just then, Michael sauntered in, a petite blonde trailing behind him. "Hey, Squirt," he said, ruffling my hair like I was still a kid. "This is Amber, my fiancée." Amber gave me a once-over and a tight smile. "Nice to meet you." Before I could respond, Mom bustled in. "Michael, honey, I've made your favorite pot roast for dinner." "Amber, dear, would you like some iced tea?" I watched, bewildered, as Mom fawned over them. It was like I wasn't even there. That night, I tossed and turned on the lumpy couch, trying to make sense of it all. The next morning, I cornered Sarah in the backyard. "What the hell is going on?" I hissed. Sarah sighed, looking tired. "A lot's changed, Abby. Michael got a cushy job at the bank, and suddenly he's the golden child. Mom and Dad act like he's their meal ticket to a comfortable retirement. But what about us? We're on our own," Sarah said bitterly. "They've made that pretty clear." As if on cue, Dad walked out. "Girls, your mother and I have been thinking. It might be best if you two found your own place. The house is getting a bit crowded with Michael and Amber here." Sarah and I exchanged glances. This wasn't a suggestion, it was an eviction notice. The next few days were a blur of apartment hunting and job searching. I landed an entry-level position at a local design firm, while Sarah continued her work as a paralegal. We found a decent 2-bedroom apartment and moved out within a week. Over the next few months, Sarah and I fell into a comfortable routine. We split chores, shared meals, and supported each other through the ups and downs of adult life. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Meanwhile, our relationship with our parents grew increasingly strained. Phone calls became rare, and when they did happen, the conversation always circled back to Michael. It hurt, being treated like an afterthought. But as the months went by, I found myself caring less and less about their approval. I had my own life now, my own achievements to be proud of. And then I met Jake. He walked into the coffee shop where I was sketching one Saturday morning, and my world shifted. Tall, with kind eyes and a crooked smile, he struck up a conversation about my drawings. Before I knew it, we were dating. Jake was everything I could have hoped for: kind, supportive, and genuinely interested in my life and work. 2 years flew by, and Jake and I decided to get married. It was time to introduce him to my family. I was a bundle of nerves the day Jake and I drove to my parents' house. The moment we stepped inside, my parents descended on us like a pair of circling hawks. Mom's eyes darted to Jake's watch and shoes, while Dad immediately started grilling him. "So, Jake, what do you do for a living?" Dad asked, his tone deceptively casual. Jake, bless him, took it in stride. "I'm a software engineer at TechCorp. Been there for about 5 years now." I watched my parents exchange a look. I could practically see the dollar signs in their eyes. For the next hour, Jake fielded questions about his job, his savings, his 5-year plan. By the end of it, I was ready to scream, but Jake remained calm and collected. Finally, Dad leaned back in his chair, a satisfied look on his face. "Well, Jake, I have to say, you seem like a fine young man. A suitable match for our Abigail." I bristled at the word suitable, like I was a horse being sold at auction, but I bit my tongue. This was going better than I'd expected. As we were leaving, Mom pulled me aside. "Abigail, dear, your father and I have been talking. We'd like to pay for your engagement party and half of the wedding expenses." I left that day feeling hopeful for the first time in years. Maybe things were finally changing. Maybe my parents were starting to see me again. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning. Mom took charge of the engagement party, booking a swanky restaurant and inviting what seemed like half the town. I provided a guest list, but she kept adding names I didn't recognize. "Don't worry, dear," she'd say when I questioned it. "These are important people. It'll be good for you to know them." I was too caught up in the excitement to argue. Jake and I threw ourselves into wedding plans, and for once, everything seemed to be falling into place. Then, a week before the engagement party, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Abigail, I'm afraid we have to cancel the party," she said, her voice oddly flat. "Your brother, well, he and Amber had a fight. She's left him. He's absolutely devastated. We can't possibly have a celebration at a time like this." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But Mom, everything's arranged. People are expecting." "Don't be selfish, Abigail," she snapped. "Your brother needs us right now. I'm sure you understand." The call ended, leaving me standing in my living room, phone in hand, feeling like I'd been punched in the gut. After the shock of my parents' decision wore off, I felt a mix of anger and despair. I needed to talk to someone who would understand, so I called Sarah. "They did what?" Sarah exclaimed when I told her what happened. "That's ridiculous. Why don't you call Michael? Find out what's really going on. I bet it's not as bad as Mom and Dad are making it out to be." I hesitated. Michael and I hadn't been close in years, but Sarah had a point. "Okay, I'll do it." With a deep breath, I dialed Michael's number. To my surprise, he picked up on the second ring. "Hey, what's up?" He sounded perfectly normal, not at all like the devastated mess our parents had described. "Michael, I heard about you and Amber." "I'm sorry. What happened?" There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Yeah, well, it's complicated. I screwed up, Abby. I cheated on her, and she found out. Anyway, why are you calling?" I explained about the engagement party, and how our parents had cancelled it because of his situation. "What?" Michael sounded genuinely surprised. "I don't care if you have a party. Hell, I wasn't even planning to come." His words confirmed what I'd suspected. This was just another excuse for our parents to control my life. Thanks for being honest, Michael. I hope things work out with Amber. After hanging up, I immediately called my parents. This had gone far enough. Mom, Dad, I just talked to Michael, I said as soon as they picked up. He doesn't care about the engagement party. He wasn't even planning to come. There's no reason to cancel it. There was a moment of silence, then Dad's voice came through, hard and angry. Abigail, I can't believe how selfish you're being. Your brother is going through a difficult time, and all you can think about is your party? But Dad, that's not. Mom cut in, her voice shrill. We raised you better than this, Abigail. Family comes first. Always. But I am family, I shouted, frustration boiling over. What about me? What about what I want? That's enough, Dad roared. The party is cancelled. End of discussion. The line went dead. I stared at my phone in disbelief, tears of anger and hurt stinging my eyes. In desperation, I called the one person who had always been in my corner, Grandma Rose, my father's mother. Through tears, I explained everything, the engagement, my parents' promise, the cancellation, and the conversation with Michael. Oh, honey, Grandma said softly. I'm so sorry you're going through this. Your parents, well, they've always had their blind spots. Let me talk to them. I waited anxiously for Grandma to call back, hoping against hope that she could talk some sense into my parents. An hour later, my phone rang. I'm sorry, Abby, Grandma said, sounding tired and frustrated. I tried, but they won't budge. Your father said they've already canceled the restaurant reservation and notified the guests. I'm so sorry. As the reality of the situation sank in, I felt a strange calm settle over me. It's okay, Grandma. It's not your fault. Thank you for trying. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, processing everything that had happened. My parents had gone behind my back, canceled my engagement party, and hadn't even had the decency to tell me themselves. I looked at the framed photo on my bedside table, a picture of my whole family from years ago, all of us smiling and happy. With a sudden, decisive movement, I turned the frame face down. It was time to accept the truth. The family in that photo didn't exist anymore. The day after the disastrous phone calls, I was nursing a cup of coffee and trying to figure out how to salvage my engagement plans when there was a knock at the door. To my surprise, it was Grandma Rose. We settled on the couch, and Grandma took a deep breath. Abby, honey, I'm afraid your parents haven't been entirely truthful with you. My stomach clenched. What do you mean? I did some digging, she said, her eyes flashing with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Your parents, they bought an expensive vacation package for Michael and Amber. 2 weeks in the Maldives, all expenses paid. And a rather pricey engagement ring for Michael to give her while they're there. They're hoping it'll be enough for Amber to forgive Michael for his indiscretion. And there's more. They've offered to pay for Michael and Amber's entire wedding. The pieces started falling into place, and I felt sick. That's why they canceled my engagement party. They're choosing Michael over me. Again. What am I supposed to do now? Jake and we were counting on their help for the wedding. Grandma straightened up, a determined look in her eye. Now, you listen to me, Abigail. Your parents might have let you down, but I won't. I'm going to pay for your engagement party. Grandma, no, I can't let you do that, I protested. Nonsense, she waved me off. I want to do this for you. And what's more, I'm going to pay for half of your wedding too. I shook my head vehemently. Absolutely not. That's too much money, Grandma. I won't let you spend your savings on me like that. Grandma's eyes twinkled. Well, then, how about this? I'll lend you the money for half the wedding. You can pay me back when you're able. No interest, of course. I'm not a bank, after all. We spent the next couple of hours planning. By the end of it, we had a new date set, 3 weeks from now, and a plan of action. As soon as Grandma left, I sat down at my computer and drafted an email to all our guests in which I informed we had postponed the engagement party for 3 weeks, and apologized for the inconvenience. The engagement party was a breath of fresh air after all the drama. Jake and I were surrounded by people who genuinely cared about us, and for one perfect evening, all the family tension melted away. The morning after the party, we dove headfirst into wedding preparations. Grandma became my rock during this time. We met regularly to discuss wedding details, poring over flower arrangements and cake designs. But our conversations often strayed far beyond wedding talk. We shared stories, laughed over old family photos. But not everyone was happy about our growing bond. About a month into our wedding planning, my phone rang. It was Mom. "Abigail," she said, her voice cold, "I need to talk to you about your grandmother. You need to stop spending so much time with her. It's not right, you taking advantage of her like this." I nearly dropped the phone in shock. Taking advantage? What are you talking about? Don't play dumb, Mom snapped. We know what you're doing. Trying to turn her against us, hoping she'll leave everything to you in her will. You've always been selfish, Abigail, but I never thought you'd stoop this low. I found my voice then, anger bubbling up. That's ridiculous, Mom. I'm not going to stop seeing Grandma just because you're paranoid. If we're done here, I have a wedding to plan. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking with rage. Little did I know, that phone call was just the beginning. The next day, Sarah called me in a panic. "Abby, have you seen Facebook?" she asked, her voice tight. "You need to look. Now." With a sense of dread, I opened the app. What I saw made my blood run cold. There, in black and white, were posts from both Mom and Dad, painting me as some kind of scheming gold digger. "Our daughter has always been selfish," one post read, "but manipulating her elderly grandmother for money is a new low." Another claimed I was tearing the family apart and refusing to consider anyone's feelings, but her own. The comments were even worse. Aunts, uncles, cousins, people I'd grown up with, all chiming in to express their disappointment in me. It felt like the entire family had turned against me overnight. I scrolled through the comments, feeling increasingly nauseous, when one caught my eye. It was from an account I didn't recognize, vehemently defending me against the onslaught of accusations. "How dare you spread such lies about your own daughter," the comment read. "Abigail is a kind and caring young woman. You should be ashamed of yourselves." My parents' responses were swift and brutal. They called the commenter a fool, and Grandma a crazy old woman who didn't know that I want to rob her. When the mystery defender continued to stand up for me, my parents resorted to name-calling and insults that made me cringe. It wasn't until later that evening, when Grandma called me, that I realized the truth. "Abby, dear," she said, her voice a mix of anger and amusement, "I hope you don't mind, but I may have stirred up a bit of trouble on Facebook." As she explained how she'd created an account to defend me, using a fake name to avoid detection, I felt a rush of love and gratitude for this incredible woman. "Oh, Grandma," I said, torn between laughter and tears, "you didn't have to do that." "Of course I did," she replied firmly. "Nobody talks about my granddaughter that way, not even my own son." As the days went by, the online attacks continued. But for every cruel comment, there was a message of support from Jake, Sarah, or one of my true friends. And of course, there was always Grandma Rose, leaving her fiery comments under her secret online persona. As our wedding day approached, Jake and I faced the difficult task of finalizing our guest list. We sat at our kitchen table, a bottle of wine between us, staring at the names we'd written down. "Are you sure about this, Abby?" Jake asked gently, pointing to the conspicuously absent names of my parents and brother. I took a deep breath and nodded. "I'm sure. After everything that's happened, I just can't have them there. I don't want that negativity on our special day." His parents had been supportive when we'd explained the situation to them. In the end, our guest list was small but meaningful. Sarah and Grandma Rose were there, of course. A handful of relatives who had stood by me through the online drama had made the cut. The rest were close friends who had become like family over the years. The ceremony was everything I'd hoped for, simple, heartfelt, and filled with love. As Jake and I exchanged vows, I looked out at our small gathering of guests and felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. These were the people who truly mattered, who had stood by us through thick and thin. As the evening wore on, Grandma Rose clinked her glass, calling for everyone's attention. "Abigail, Jake," she began, her voice strong and clear. "Now, I know you two insisted on paying me back for my contribution to this wonderful day. But I have an announcement to make." I felt Jake's hand tighten around mine as Grandma continued. "I've decided to forgive the debt. Consider it my wedding gift to you both, and an investment in your happiness." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Then, to my embarrassment, I burst into tears. Unable to contain myself, I rushed around the table and enveloped her in a hug. "Thank you," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. "For everything." The rest of the reception passed in a blur of joy and laughter. As Jake and I swayed on the dance floor for our first dance, I caught sight of Sarah and Grandma Rose, arm in arm, beaming at us. In that moment, surrounded by the warmth and love of our chosen family, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Yes, there was still pain from the rift with my parents and brother. But looking around at the smiling faces of those who had chosen to stand by us, I knew we had all the family we needed. Life has a funny way of coming full circle. It was almost a year after our wedding when the final act of our family drama unfolded. I was having Sunday brunch with Jake, Sarah, and Grandma Rose, a tradition we'd started after the wedding, when Grandma dropped a bombshell. "I've rewritten my will," she announced casually, as if commenting on the weather. "The bulk of my estate will be split between you and Sarah." We were stunned into silence. It was Sarah who finally found her voice. "But what about Dad and Michael?" Grandma's eyes hardened. "They've made their choices. I'm making mine." Of course, news travels fast in families, even fractured ones. It wasn't long before my parents found out, and all hell broke loose. I was at work when my phone started buzzing incessantly with notifications. Ducking into an empty conference room, I opened my messages to find a barrage of angry texts from my parents. "How dare you manipulate your grandmother like this? We always knew you were after her money. You've torn this family apart." I felt my chest tighten, old wounds threatening to reopen. But before I could spiral, another message came through, this one from Grandma. "Don't worry, dear. I'm handling it." And handle it she did. Later that evening, Grandma called to fill me in on what had transpired. She had invited my parents over, ostensibly to discuss the will. But when they arrived, spitting fire and accusations, she calmly pulled out her iPad and opened Facebook. "Do you recognize this account?" she asked them, pointing to the profile that had so vehemently defended me months ago. My parents, confused, shook their heads. "That's me," Grandma revealed. "I saw every hateful word you wrote about Abigail. I saw how you turned the family against her. And I saw how you spoke about me when you thought I couldn't see." She then proceeded to show them screenshots of their own words, calling her crazy old woman and worse. "I may be old," she told them, her voice steel, "but I'm far from crazy. And I have more than enough evidence here to take you to court for harassment and defamation if you continue this behavior." My parents, she said, had gone pale. "But I don't want to do that," Grandma continued. "What I want is for you to take a long, hard look at yourselves. At the damage you've done to this family with your favoritism and your cruelty." In the weeks that followed, an uneasy truce settled over the family. My parents retreated, chastened by Grandma's words and the threat of legal action. They made no more public posts about me, and the family grapevine fell silent. As for Michael, life had a way of balancing the scales. Despite all my parents' efforts, the expensive vacation, the ring, the promises of a lavish wedding, Amber couldn't forgive his infidelity. She left him for good, and last I heard, he was back living with our parents. It's been 3 years since that day. Jake and I are happy in our life together. We bought a small house not far from where Sarah lives, and we see her and Grandma Rose regularly. Our Sunday brunches have become a cherished tradition, filled with laughter, love, and occasionally, Grandma's legendary apple pie. My parents and Michael? We don't talk. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for what might have been, but mostly, I'm at peace with it. I've learned that family isn't just about blood, it's about the people who stand by you, who love you unconditionally, who fight for you when you can't fight for yourself.